and such amazing women that I've had the pleasure to work with over the years. And this particular moment is really a moment that I look at with immense sense of pride and also humility of what we have managed to achieve. And I'm really looking forward for us to take this moment to share our stories and how our different stories have intertwined and led to this transformative potential that SAGER guidelines bring with itself. I've prepared just a few slides, just also really to pay due recognition to the amazing people that they have come along the way. So this is not a presentation of the SAGER guidelines. I do suggest that you kind of attend other webinars that specifically look at the SAGER guidelines. I look back at the SAGER guidelines story just because it came up as a very simple idea at the time when I was the editor of the Journal of the International AIDS Society. And as a scientist myself and editor, I was quite surprised by the lack of attention to sex and gender in a kind of a health topic where we knew that both sex and gender and sexuality and gender identity and all the other aspects related to gender norms, roles, and relation played a fundamental role in terms of both risk to infection, vulnerability, susceptibility, access to treatment and services, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, when I was receiving the manuscripts for publication, very few journals, actually papers, paid attention to these aspects. So at that time, as the editor of the journal, I felt like it was within the realm of my responsibility and authority to introduce a gender policy. So that's how it all started. So when we started to introduce a gender policy policy at the International AIDS Society Journal, and following that, we had a meeting with a few other HIV journals, and we convinced them to introduce the similar policies in their journals. But then it felt like, okay, if this was easier than I thought, why can't we just scale it up to make sure that we can apply that to all the journals? And around that time, I was privileged to be elected at the Council of the European Association of Science Editors. And I think one of the first conferences I attended that was held in Tallinn, I just came up the idea that we should start a gender policy committee. European Association of Science Editors is obviously association that has an interest to work with publishers and editors and authors to improve the quality and standards of academic publishing. And, you know, very kind of organically, a group of people during that conference and a few others that joined afterwards created the Gender Policy Committee, again, with the vision to ensure that there is a greater gender balance in science and publishing practices for enhanced quality, diversity, transparency for science to remain at the forefront of innovation. And the pictures that you see is from a extremely important meeting where we all within our own capacities, either individually or professionally, sponsored our own travel and gathered in Athens. And I think this was 2013, if I'm not mistaken, where actually the text of the current SAGER guidelines, as you see, was drafted during that meeting. So I wanted to kind of really pay attention and kind of do a recognition to the amazing work that has been done. And this has really been a collective effort. And I probably have missed a number of names, but I really wanted to make sure that kind of recognize the immense contribution of people that they have provided support, input, have championed the SAGER guidelines throughout this whole process, including the initial, my co-chair, Thomas Babor, that was really the partner in crime from the very beginning, as well as all the initial Gender Policy Committee members and everyone else that has come along the way and continues to champion the implementation and wider adoption of the SAGER guidelines. Again, the SAGER guideline is really a tool. Our vision and our mission is to address the persistent and entrenched sex and gender biases in research, in research reporting across discipline and across the globe. And we are using the SAGER guidelines as a tool to bring forward a little bit, both raise awareness, but as well as introduce and inspire institutional and systemic changes in the different ways within the broader research ecosystem that can really sustain a meaningful and long-lasting change. And again, thanks to this amazing collective effort, we have now seen a great uptake of the SAGER guidelines. First of all, a number of different organizations, associations, individuals have volunteered their time and translated the SAGER guidelines into 7 languages, and a couple of others are on the way. I think we are working still on French and Farsi. A number of journals, as well as the major leading publishers, have all adopted the SAGER guidelines and introduced that into their instructions to authors, as well as some other bigger journals. And I'm sure that Mikashvi will talk about the experience of Find, and the COPE has adopted that, I think, during even the leadership where Vivian was part of the COPE. And most recently, the World Health Organization has adopted the SAGER guideline, which we think is really an important milestone as a major leading authority in global health globally. So with that, I will just say that by now, the SAGER guidelines have been accessed 906,000. So help us reach to 1 million soon. And feel free to be a champion to, again, use that in your work, translate it into your language, and try to kind of use it in your work for us to collectively try to bridge the gender evidence gap. And I stopped there, and I hope that I haven't gone over my time.
Thank you so much, Shirin. And let's also celebrate the 8th year of publication of SAGER guidelines.
Indeed.
I would like to now ask Agnieszka to actually continue the story by telling us about the publishers, how they started implementing these guidelines within journals and their policies.
Thank you so much, Bahar. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect, thank you.
Fantastic. So I will speak on behalf of Elsevier. I cannot speak on behalf of the whole publishing industry, but however, I hope this is a conversation we can take up together as well. In 2023, Elsevier, Self-Press and Lancet actually incorporated SAGER into our guides and information for authors by creating a new section. So we're talking here about over 2,300 journals, not only in health and medical sciences, but also in life, social, and physical sciences. We decided to go ahead with an opt-out implementation model, where if a journal wanted to opt out from that text, we did a keyword search in order to double-check if indeed the title does not publish content related to human subjects, animals, or eukaryotic cells. And it turns out there are very few such titles, and the majority are in mathematics. So we are very aware the topic of sex and gender is very politicized, but we feel that as a scientific publisher, we are in a privileged position where we can pull away from that political debate, right? And because as a publisher, we strive for accuracy, inclusion, scientific integrity, as well as precision, rigor, and reproducibility, which simply put leads to better science. In a way, it makes it much easier for us to make the right choices. And this makes the pursuit of full implementation of SAGER analysis into our business, as usual, a natural choice. However, we need to recognize that we don't exist in vacuum, right? We publish research that has already been conducted. We receive articles describing studies that have been designed, funded, and very often concluded. While some retrospective work might be possible if we ask an author to come back to us with disaggregated data, for example, but this is definitely not ideal. In order to see impactful change, the whole research ecosystem has to shift and align. And what I find really interesting as well is that there's a perception that we have put this behind us, and this is very similar as well in terms of diversity and gender diversity and equal opportunities. We have discussed it. The problem came to light already quite some time ago, right? It's done and dusted. However, when we look at data, the picture is still rather different. The precise percentage of scientific content that has sex and gender reporting done properly, it's actually difficult to determine due to lack of comprehensive analysis. We have varying standards across different fields of research. However, I'll just quote a few studies here to give you an idea that the reporting is actually often insufficient. So I don't know if you know that until 1960s, the sex of animals used in research was rarely reported except in experiments related to reproduction. Surprise, surprise. Even today, the sex of animal subjects is omitted in 22 to 42% of articles in neuroscience, physiology, and interdisciplinary biology journals. So that's by Berry et al. From 2011. You have the references in your resources as well from the webinar.